music, the costumes, the hair. There's only one ABBA. And after decades of going their own way, the Swedish supergroup is back.
For decades, the world danced to ABBA, believing it was the sound of pure joy. They were two happy couples who built an empire on pop perfection, a flawless story of success. But it was a carefully constructed lie. Because behind the dazzling smiles, their intertwined marriages had become a private battlefield of betrayal and heartbreak.
It's just that I trust my senses. I trust what I feel and what I hear.
A truth so painful, they buried it inside their most famous song, leading to a single, agonizing recording session that shattered the band forever. The blueprint for that final, heartbreaking performance wasn't a sheet of music. It was the flawless public image they built for the world, a gilded cage secretly destined to collapse. The gilded cage. The night they conquered the world was the same night they signed a personal contract with disaster, tying their hearts to their careers forever. The year is 1974. On a brightly lit stage in Brighton, England, four unknown Swedes are about to cause a cultural explosion. Dressed in shimmering satin and silver platform boots, they launch into Waterloo, a song so vibrant and energetic it feels like a lightning strike. This is the Eurovision Song Contest, and against all odds, they win. In that single moment of victory, broadcast to hundreds of millions, Agnetha, Bjorn, Benny, and Frida are catapulted from Swedish obscurity to global superstars. It is a triumphant, intoxicating beginning. But it is also their point of no return, the moment their four private lives became a single, public commodity. This victory was the trigger for the ticking time bomb that would eventually destroy them. As their fame skyrocketed, every success became another golden bar on their gilded cage. The world fell in love, not just with their music, but with their story. Two beautiful, talented couples making music together. Their shrewd manager, Stig Andersson, knew this was their unique selling point. The ABBA brand was built on this image of domestic bliss and professional harmony. So, as hits like Mamma Mia and Dancing Queen conquered the charts, the stakes grew higher. They weren't just selling records, they were selling a fantasy. And with every sold-out tour and every platinum album, the pressure to maintain that fantasy became immense. They were forced to perform their love story for the cameras, smiling and holding hands, even as the first cracks began to appear behind the scenes. While the world cheered, their perfect image was becoming a prison. To understand why they allowed their lives to become so intertwined, you have to look inside their minds. The psychological root of their eventual crisis was a genuine, shared belief that their love was their magic ingredient. They weren't faking it at the start. They were four people who had found in each other a perfect synergy of love and creativity. This was especially critical for Frida. Born in Norway from a wartime affair and orphaned as a child, she had spent her life searching for the stability and family she never had. For her, ABBA wasn't just a band. It was the ultimate dream realized, a loving, successful, and unbreakable family unit. This deep-seated need made the band's eventual collapse a catastrophic personal failure she would struggle with for years. They all believed their four-hearted machine was invincible. This belief made them inseparable, but it also made them vulnerable, incapable of building a wall between their hearts and their work. This looming shadow of personal sacrifice grew darker with each passing year. The ABBA machine was relentless. Grueling promotional schedules, months away from home, and the suffocating glare of the media began to take their toll. Agnetha, a homebody by nature, developed a crippling fear of flying and a deep-seated guilt over leaving her young children for long tours. The joy of creation was slowly being replaced by the exhausting drudgery of being a global brand. Arguments that would be normal in any marriage became potential crises that could threaten a multi-million-dollar enterprise. They were living in a high-pressure bubble, and the smiles that looked so effortless on television were becoming increasingly difficult to fake. By the peak of their fame, the illusion of happiness was stretched to its breaking point, and a private war behind studio doors was about to explode into the most beautiful and destructive song they would ever create. The agony in the music. At the absolute height of their power, a secret crisis in the studio would force them to turn their most private agony into a global anthem with devastating consequences. By the late 1970s, ABBA had transcended pop stardom to become a global institution. They were a commercial juggernaut, their music a universal language of joy. Their albums, from arrival to the album, were not just collections of songs. They were cultural events, shipping platinum all over the world. Their 1977 world tour, documented in ABBA, the movie, saw them performing to massive, adoring crowds from Australia to Europe. They were more than a band. They were a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of joyful escape in a cynical decade. On the surface, their empire was untouchable, their image a flawless, four-headed monolith of pop perfection. The fairy tale they had sold to the world had seemingly come true, solidifying their status as the biggest, most beloved band on the planet. Every smile for the camera, every hit record, added another layer of gold to the cage they had built for themselves. But behind the velvet curtain of their unprecedented success, the fantasy was turning into a waking nightmare. The first crack appeared in early 1979 when Bjorn and Agnetha announced their divorce. The news sent a seismic shock through their fan base and the global media. The ABBA brand was built on the foundation of two happy couples, and now half of that foundation had crumbled. The band's official statement was a masterpiece of public relations, framing the split as a mature, amicable decision that would not affect the band. It promised a new, stronger ABBA, united in their dedication to the music. This was the first great lie. The truth was a bitter and painful end, fueled by Bjorn's all-consuming dedication to the ABBA machine and Agnetha's desperate longing for a quiet life at home with their children. The public was told it was a simple parting of ways, but privately, it was the first catastrophic failure of their shared dream. The band's image was now built on a crack, and as one marriage lay in ruins, the other was in its final, agonizing death throes. Benny and Frida's famously passionate relationship had reportedly devolved into a cold war of bitter arguments, public spats, and deep, simmering resentment. Rumors of Benny's wandering eye grew louder. A devastating blow for Frida, who had found in ABBA the family and stability she had craved her entire life. The two couples who had once shared everything were now two pairs of ex-lovers, contractually obligated to stand side by side on stage and sing about love and happiness. A daily, humiliating, and soul-crushing torture. This is when the band's most devastating secret was forged, in the sterile, soundproofed environment of Polar Music Studios in Stockholm. In the midst of this emotional wreckage, Bjorn and Benny retreated to write, and what emerged was a song of such brutal, devastating honesty, it would change everything. That song was "The Winner Takes It All." And this is the truth Benny Andersson has finally confirmed after 40 years of speculation and denial. While the song's lyrics were a direct, almost diary-like reflection of Bjorn and Agnetha's split, written by Bjorn in a single cathartic night with a bottle of brandy, the raw, visceral agony embedded in the haunting, cascading piano melody was channeled directly from the fresh hell of his own collapsing marriage to Frida. He poured all of his pain, his guilt, and his profound heartbreak into the music, creating a sweeping, tragic ballad that was as beautiful as it was cruel. Then came the act of unimaginable, almost sadistic artistic dedication. They brought Frida into the studio to sing it. It was a task that should have fallen to Agnetha, the song's lyrical subject, but she reportedly refused, finding it too cruelly personal to endure. So, Frida, whose own marriage was imploding, was asked to voice the pain. Benny sat in the control room, watching through the glass as the woman he was in the process of leaving, the woman he had just told he was in love with someone else, delivered the most iconic and heartbreaking vocal performance of her life. Imagine the scene. The studio lights dimmed, Frida alone at the microphone, tears in her eyes, pouring every ounce of her personal devastation into the lyrics. She wasn't just singing Bjorn's words, she was living them. And Benny, the man responsible for her pain, listened intently, judging her performance not as a husband, but as a producer, reportedly asking for take after take, forcing her to dig deeper into her own sorrow. It was a performance that was a direct, unfiltered mirror of their shared tragedy. Every note was soaked in her own palpable heartbreak, every line a testament to their failure. It was no longer a recording session, it was a public confession, a therapy session broadcast on vinyl. The result was a stunning, breathtaking piece of art, but it was born from an act of profound emotional violence. It was, as Benny would later admit, the most painful experience of his career, a moment of artistic triumph built on personal ruin, and it was the final straw. The song that cemented their legacy as musical geniuses was also the unforgivable blow that made their future as a band impossible. They had crossed a sacred line, weaponizing their deepest wounds for the sake of their art. The trust that held them together was gone, shattered on the studio floor. The song was a masterpiece, but the price was everything. A prison of their own creation. After turning their private pain into one last masterpiece, the four members of ABBA were forced to face the chilling consequences of their creation. The atmosphere in the studio after that fateful recording was never the same again. The fragile pretense of professionalism, which had somehow survived the first divorce, completely shattered. That session had drawn a line in the sand, a point of no return. The joy that had defined their sound, the infectious, bubbly optimism that had conquered the world, was gone for good, replaced by a dark, haunting melancholy that would permeate their final album, The Visitors. The music became a direct reflection of their reality. The album was a masterpiece of divorce pop, filled with paranoia, regret, and cold introspection. Songs like When All Is Said and Done, a defiant anthem sung by Frida just after her divorce from Benny was finalized, and One of Us, a sorrowful ballad led by Agnetha, were no longer just pop tunes. They were grim, public dispatches from the front lines of their emotional war. The lyrics spoke of regret, loneliness, and the bitter end of love. During their final strained television appearances to promote the album, the distance between them was painfully obvious. There was no eye contact, no joyful interaction, just four professionals going through the motions, their awkward body language and forced smiles betraying the truth. The magic was gone, replaced by the mundane, painful reality of four people who could barely stand to be in the same room. The gossip columns began to whisper, and the world started to realize that the perfect image they had sold for years was a fantasy. The end came not with a bang, but with a quiet, heartbreaking whisper. In late 1982, after a final strained public performance where their lack of connection was palpable, they announced a temporary break. It was another carefully worded lie, a gentle way of telling the world that the party was over without having to reveal the devastating reason why. The truth was that the emotional toll of their divorces, crystallized and magnified by the very music they were now forced to create and perform, had become unbearable. They retreated from the spotlight, each member going their separate ways, refusing to reunite for nearly 40 years. Frida and Agnetha launched solo careers, while Benny and Bjorn focused on writing musicals. The silence was deafening. The band that had been built on love had been irrevocably and completely destroyed by its loss. The final tragic irony is the legacy of the very song that tore them apart. The Winner Takes It All became their most celebrated and enduring anthem, a timeless classic beloved by critics and fans for its raw, emotional power. The track that documented their private agony became a permanent public monument to their heartbreak. Every time it played on the radio, every time a new generation discovered its heartbreaking beauty, it served as a global reminder of the pain they had endured together, locking the memory of their suffering into their public legacy. They could never escape it. They had successfully turned their personal tragedy into universal art, but in doing so, they had created a beautiful, heartbreaking prison from which they and their story would never be free. The verdict on a masterpiece. In the end, the secret to ABBA's most enduring song was also the definitive reason for their tragic demise. We witnessed the journey of two young couples who, bound by love and ambition, built a global empire of joy, only to watch it crumble under the weight of their own hearts. They clawed their way to the absolute pinnacle of pop success, but the crushing pressure of maintaining their own flawless image created a private prison of fame, heartbreak, and profound sadness. They were the world's ultimate feel-good band, yet they created their greatest and most powerful art from their deepest and most personal suffering. The very armor they constructed to sell their fairy tale to the world, the image of two happy, perfect couples, became a cage, forcing them to turn their most painful private moments into public entertainment. Their relentless quest to maintain the illusion of happiness ultimately led them to a creative peak so painful and so real, it ended them for good. This leads to the great unanswered question of their legacy. Was it worth sacrificing their personal happiness and the band itself to create a masterpiece that would connect with millions for generations to come? The world heard the melody, but only they heard the confession. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story.